Love classic cars, vintage machines, and the stories that drive them. Motorheritage.org.au is your hub for preserving Australia's rich motoring past.
That was the first Lamborghini I ever experienced. It was in Melbourne. There was the Lamborghini importer was a bloke called Peter Mitchell, and he got in touch to say that he had a 400 GT that we were welcome to write a story about.
There's also, I think it was an Espada, and Mel came up with a wonderful heading for the Espada, which did not have a red line. So the heading was, "The red line is courage," which I always thought was terrific.
Thank you, Peter. Lancia Stratos, two people in it. Wendy, now my wife, was the art director of Car. She's one of the people who helped make it good. She's a Sydney girl. Car was absolutely all about Aussies, and I'm very proud of the impact that we collectively had. Anyway, Nick Mason, who was the Pink Floyd's drummer, still is. Nick has a pretty good collection of cars, and he lent me a series of them, one of which was the Stratos. It was cold and wet at the time, and as you probably know, Stratos is somewhat tail happy, so it was looking out the side window a lot when we're driving that in the rain. That's the first Porsche 930. That was the first right-hand drive car, and it was one of 9 pre-production cars that were made and sent to the UK. I got word that it was coming and asked Porsche if I could do a piece on it for a car cover story, and they sent me with a driver called Nick Four, who was a well-known, still is, 911 racer, and he and I had an extremely enjoyable day, covering a lot of miles in England. I took that picture, and one of the times it wasn't sideways, through a corner. Still in touch with Nick, he's a very good guy. Another of Nick Mason's cars, a D-Type of course, that's taken on the M4 motorway west of London in Wiltshire. That car leads to another car that we'll see in a bit, Nick's Ferrari 250 GTO. He had this car before he got the Ferrari, and he said he was able to buy the GTO for £75,000 instead of the £100,000 that it was then worth, because if he lent his D-Type to the guy who was selling the Ferrari, that would be helpful to the man with the Ferrari, because he had a D-Type in crates that had been carried out of the factory in bits as the Jaguar factory was burning. But what he needed was a reference to put his D-Type in bits together. So he said to Nick, "I'll sell you the GTO at a discounted price if you lend me your D-Type for as long as it takes for me to put mine together." That's it has a strong link to his GTO. That's Duncan Hamilton's Le Mans winning C-Type, owned and restored and kept in immaculate condition by his son Adrian, and who kindly lent me that for a story for Autocar later on. Those cars were so benign. You guys have probably driven those cars, but the thing that surprised me about them was just how benign and pleasant they were, and made you feel comfortable.
Yeah, quite right.
That was the first day I went to Ferrari. I'd written to Enzo Ferrari to say, look, coming from Australia, I was aware of the magazine Sports Car World and Wheels, because we always used to send copies and got letters back saying, thank you for the lovely story on our Ferrari, etc. Anyway, I'd said rather brashly, do you think I could come to the factory, have a good look around, see the racing department, perhaps borrow a car, take it out, and perhaps interview Mr. Ferrari. Anyway, a car did appear, and so we went out for an hour or so in that. As you can see, I had hair and a rather straggly beard at the time. It's a considerable source of embarrassment to me that I did turn up at Ferrari looking very hippie-ish, and I have always wondered what Enzo Ferrari thought when this rather wild-looking bloke from Australia turned up. But he seemed to take a shine to me and always welcomed me back, and there was wonderful little moments on the many subsequent visits when I made when his assistant, who was a marvellous man called Dr. Franco Gozzi, when Franco would grab your elbow and say, "We must go now, Mr. Ferrari is waiting to see you." Franco always had a great sense of the theatre about him. Another one of Nick Mason's cars, that's his Daytona. I had a truly wonderful drive around southern England in that car, and did get it flat out. I enjoyed the piece I wrote about that. It's in, if anyone has that book I did, Collected Stories, it's in that, and that's one of my favourites. We put a heading on this saying, "In the clearing stands a boxer," of course ripped off from Simon & Garfunkel. But the serious thing about this photograph is that it's a really dull, wet day in England in the winter, and there you are with the newest, latest Ferrari to come, and you've got to get some decent pictures. What do you do? Well, you carry a bucket and lots of cleaning kit, and you make one side of the car look immaculate, and what you can't see is on the other side of the car, it's absolutely covered in mud. And if you look at the tree behind the car, you'll see there's light coming around it and what looks like mist through the woods. And the mist is from smoke bombs that art director Wendy always carried for just such moments. And the flash, the light from behind the trees, me standing there with the photographer's flash gun, popping it every now and then to add a bit of drama to the picture. But again, the serious point is that what began to make Car Magazine, and Wheels too, because they did the same thing, was to concentrate on getting as good a pictures as we could possibly get, because most of the other magazines didn't do that, and it was a key point of difference. It wasn't just the words, it was also the quality of photography and the graphics.
Yeah, the way they were used. Yeah.
Yeah. And there is the GTO. Nick Mason was involved with a consortium of Ferrari owners who set up a Ferrari workshop, and they were having a driving day at Goodwood. So I went down, and I saw that he had the GTO, and I said, "Nick, love to do a piece on the GTO one day if you don't mind." And he literally threw me the keys. He said, "Well, you take it, leave your car with me." I don't know what I had, some desk car, and you take it. And I said, "Well, really, I'm a bit busy now." He said, no, just hang on to it till you're ready to use it, and bring it back, week, 10 days, doesn't matter. And I said, "Look, I already knew it was already worth at least £100,000. I had just bought a house at the absolute top of my budget, which was £14,000, and I had no garage.
In Clapham.
In Clapham, southwest London. So this is a bit of an ass-puckering moment. And I looked stolen. What he said, "Look, the only thing that matters is the chassis plate. Everything else can be refabricated. The chassis plate is the only thing that matters. Don't worry about it." Anyway, I took it, and I phoned Ian Fraser, who was another Aussie who had been my predecessor as editor of Car, and was one of the two people who then owned the magazine. He lived up in Norfolk, so I said, "I've got this GTO, can I come and stay with you for a couple of days?" So went off up there, had a photographer called Richard Davies come the next day, and we photographed the GTO. It wasn't a great place to photograph cars because, as you can see, we're in a forest. Lots of roads through forests up there, so not the best place to photograph a GTO, but the experience of that car was truly amazing. And to drive it through the night for 3 hours on your own, truly exceptional as well.
Didn't you have it parked outside the house in Clapham? Because you had it for a week or 6 days?
A week. So when I went back to London, get on with work again, the car had to live outside my house, so I just drove it. It was the only car I had that week, so I drove it from Clapham into the office in town, and it just lived outside my house for a week.
And what's the GTO worth today?
Well, I think the last one was £60 million.
Pounds?
Yeah. It's probably heading for 100 million now, I reckon. I had a mate who had a 512 and a 365 GTC4, and he'd like to take them to track days, so he'd give me a call and say, want to come and drive some Ferraris. So I liked having that relationship with him, and we just swapped cars all the way to circuits and back. But I particularly liked that GTC. It was a very benign car. I love those transaxle Ferraris. They seem to me to have such a lovely balance about them. Enzo Ferrari, you never forget the moment when you walk into his office, and there he is down the way. It's a long office. He was sitting halfway down, slightly in the gloom. He never liked it very brightly lit. And facing him, directly facing his desk, was the portrait of his son Dino, with 3 little lights above it, representing the colours of Italy. And often that was the only light in the room, particularly late in the day. Anyway, he was very gracious to me. As I say, I don't know why. I think there was something a bit odd about this hairy-looking bloke from Tasmania who'd rocked up in his office. But every time I went after him, I probably went twice a year, I would get the message, Mr. Ferrari is waiting to see you. So you just pop in for 5 minutes. Everyone had, of course, asked all the questions forever, and there were never going to be any different answers anyway. So it was just a genial meeting, and then he would push a buzzer and summon an aide and ask him to bring in a gift. So I have several books signed in the famous purple ink, as with that one. As you can see, somewhat old and yellowing now. But I also have ties, a briefcase, and initially he gave me a very large yellow ashtray with a black horse in the middle, which I sent to my father in Tasmania, who was a lifelong smoker, and that was his pride and joy, the ashtray that Enzo Ferrari gave my son. Lots to say about F40s, of course, but I got word that Ferrari were working on that car and were getting close to launching it. So I got in touch with Franco and said, look, can we come down and do the F40? He said, yeah, we don't really know which day. We're hoping to get it down to the celebration for the 40th anniversary, but come and take your chances. So I rolled in on a Friday with a photographer, and we sat and waited in the gatehouse, as you often do. But we'd been there about half an hour when in came the features editor from the German magazine Automotive and Sport with his photographer. So I then realised Franco had been double dealing a bit, and that we weren't going to be just exclusive, the Germans were on the case too. However, after an hour or so, this German journalist was getting more and more annoyed, literally fuming, and started to shout at the bloke in the gatehouse, where's my car, where's my car? And that sort of doesn't go down really well at Ferrari. We knew the form, my photographer and I, you just sit and wait, and eventually a car will appear. Anyway, after another hour, the German duo upped and left, so angry the car wasn't ready. Why isn't the car ready? So they left, and we went through the day, lunch, the Cavallino over the road, pleasant as always, and onwards till 6 o'clock in the evening when Franco comes in, gives his great big shrug and says, sorry, maybe tomorrow. Well, tomorrow was Saturday. That's fine, we just rocked up at 9 o'clock again, and lo and behold, after an hour or so, we hear this extraordinary noise, and the F40 pulls up outside, and it's handed over to us to go and and do a story. The Germans never got the story. In Italy, we all had long since learned, you just go with the flow. It'll be fine. Later they had an official launch at Fiorano, and there's myself, the head of Ferrari North America, and an extremely well-known American lady writer called Denise McCluggage.
Good racer too.
Good racer, yeah. You couldn't go wrong really putting Ferraris on the cover, but what do you do when you have 5? So we tried to do something with that cover that was broader than just one car, and they were older Ferraris. So we did that, but also the serious point about that, going back to what we were saying about graphic design earlier, that is an indication of the kind of graphic rule breaking that car became extremely well known for, and duly influenced all kinds of other magazines. That's a cover by Wendy. So you rock up at Ferrari or Lamborghini or Maserati or Porsche or anywhere, and you're given a car and you've got a few hours to get both a story and a lot of good pictures. So you need a photographer with you who's got a very sharp eye and a great sense of opportunism. So you're driving along, you don't know what you're going to see, but a good photographer, like one I can see over there, will spot an opportunity. So this guy, Richard Cook, saw this lady who'd been foraging and so stop, and reverse, and so that picture's a result of that. That's the kind of eye you need, and the quick decisions when you have very few hours, but you've got to get an absolutely top level story. And I love that picture for its simplicity and its class.
Yeah.
I've had a few trips across America. This was a later one, going from east to west across old Route 2. Route 2 runs from the upper Michigan Peninsula to Seattle, very close to the Canadian border at times. And a friend had told me about it, and that you hardly saw any traffic. So I came up with the idea of a competition to promote autocar, and that would be to win a coast-to-coast trip in a Jaguar XJ12, all expenses paid, a business class flights with Virgin, to get you and a partner there. But then, of course, I thought, well, someone's going to have to recce this trip. That'll have to be me and Wendy. So our old Aussie mate John Crawford, who was then the PR director of Jaguar in North America, John arranged a car for us. This picture was then taken sort of halfway across in North Dakota, when you can see from the dark clouds behind us, we had just outrun a tornado. We could see as we went west this bad weather coming, and then we could hear the weather radio saying there were tornadoes in all the adjoining counties, reeling them off. And I thought, wonder if we can outrun it. We had no idea what to do if you get caught in a car. We saw a rancher at a filling station, and I said, sir, could you please tell me, what do we do if we get caught in the weather in the car? And he looked at me as if I was mad and says, get in the ditch, buddy. And what he meant was that between the two lanes of the highway like that, there's a great big V-shaped ditch. He meant just drive the car in the ditch and get out and lie flat. And if you survived the mosquitoes, you'd be lucky. Anyway, so I thought, I wonder if we can outrun this. So I stuck the Jag on 140 miles an hour on the cruise control for about half an hour. We did not see another car. The radar never blipped for the police warnings. And so we did duly outrun it. And that picture was taken when we were safely on the other side. Not long after I backed off, we came over a crest, and there, sure enough, was a state highwayman. My first trip to America, you couldn't have possibly had a better introduction to America. I'd become friendly with a bloke called David E. Davis Jr., who was the editor of Car and Driver magazine. And I called David E. one day and said, "What are you up to?" And he said, "Well, I've just married this lady called Jeannie. She's never seen America. I'm going to show her. Why don't you come? We're starting in the Napa Valley, and Mercedes are launching the 6.9 SEL 6.9. Do you want to come?" I was a bit British and polite about it and said, "Oh, you're on your honeymoon." "I don't think so." And I put the phone down and thought, this is another one of those offers. I knew David, he knew America extraordinarily well and wonderful people all across America. So I rang him back and said, "Look, if you don't mind, I'll come." Anyway, this picture is taken in Arizona as we went east. The car was silver. It was the days of CB radio. One of the truckers, as we went past him rather quick, said, "What's the handle on that there, silver Mercedes?" And because we'd just stopped to buy food and things, the car was full of food wrappings and stuff. And David looked around and said, "This is the silver trash can." So as we went east across America, one trucker passed us on to the next as the silver trash can coming by, chaps. Yeah, well, not chaps, but guys. Another one of those rather frantic days in the Monna area. Picked up this Countach S, and it's a difficult area around there. As people probably know, it's very flat, featureless, very industrial. It's hard to find places to get decent photographs. So again, with a good snapper, in this case, a guy called John Perkins, on the lookout for something like this. So he sees these kids playing basketball in a schoolyard as we were on our way back to the Lamborghini factory. And so he went and grabbed the head teacher and said, "Look, can we just bring this car here? It's a Lamborghini near Sant'Agata Bolognese. They're not going to say no." So that picture was taken like that. And then just a little bit of magazine craft stuff here. As you get doing this down the road, you realise it's pretty good, pretty helpful if you have a cover line that will work with the picture. Hence, stand back. Just as, everything works when you've got the words really working in harmony with the photograph. I really got deeply into magazine craft in my later role, and you could see how important it was that you're doing things where there's the last little bit of polish.
Mel, would you need clearances these days for all those kids at the back there?
Working with children. Probably not in Italy, but everywhere else. Yeah. Oh yeah, so Perky had just got the kids to move, and you can see from the movement that he shot it on a low shutter speed too. Anyway, nice pictures, I like those. Another day in the area, of course, particularly in May, early in the year in Italy, it rains a lot. So they started off offering us a dark blue car, and we said, "Look, going to be a bit of a problem. Have you got another one?" And they said, "Well, there's this yellow one." So we took that yellow. That's
Is it a Bora or a Merak?
It's a Merak, yeah. Sweet car.
Yeah.
Not very powerful or fast, but sweet.
Yeah.
Underrated. Underrated, yeah. As was the Bora. Appreciated it more now.
Yes.
3-litre Urraco in a valley in Wales. I had a truly wonderful drive that day from the top to the bottom of Wales. In those days, not much traffic, never saw a policeman, so you could really get on with it quite well. And those cars were well balanced. Bob Wallace reckoned that he put more effort into sorting the Urraco than all of the other cars during his time there, because it was quite difficult with its 4 McPherson struts and yeah.
Yes. And that you'd be going on is it called the Beacons? Brecon Beacons? Is that?
Yeah, that's west of the Brecon Beacons, over near the west coast. I've forgotten the name of the valley. It's one of those long Welsh names that only the Welsh can say. Yeah.
No, we've seen that one before, so we won't stop there.
Yeah. 924 turbo was pretty much a forgotten car now, but they were extraordinarily good. I remember getting into conversation with Derek Bell about them, and he said he was his absolute favourite. He had a whole series of Porsches, but given the choice, he would take his 924 Turbo GT.
Over a 944 turbo.
Have I got it right? Is it? Yes.
That's a 924.
Yeah, yes it is. Yes, he did. It was just sweeter. And of course the factory had given him one on a long-term loan. And that was the day the car was launched. Picked it up from Zuffenhausen and went looking for locations. And my friend John Mason, the photographer, saw that bridge and decided to shoot it black and white. Because it wasn't never going to work as well in colour. Do you think, Warwick, it wouldn't be so good? So, maybe it was black and white. Yeah, and then in those days you could manipulate prints much all in the printing, really. Yeah.
The original 924 was a shitbox of a car. It was a terrible car. 4-speed gearbox, awful engine, terrible driving position, handled well, but it was awful. But the 944 I always thought was underrated.
I agree. I like them a lot too. Yeah. If people ask me as they do, what's the best car you've ever driven, it was very hard for me to go past this, even after 959, even after the arrival of the McLaren F1. I thought this car was so extraordinarily competent and easy to drive. And I remember Professor Helmut Bott, who was really the father of it, telling me the night before I drove it, I had dinner with him, and he said, look, our objective with this car is to make the fastest, most competent car we can, but can be driven by anybody. You, your wife, and you can do anything with it in any situation. And I think they achieved that. It was seriously easy to drive. That day, where did I go from Stuttgart? We went north. Anyway, they told me about a new motorway, and I went there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we were able to run it flat. And that was the first time I got close to 200 miles an hour. It was doing 197 miles an hour for a long way. But of course, you realise, I mean, Spencer knows this so well. Then you've got to look so far ahead, although there wasn't much traffic on the Autobahn. Anything a long way ahead, like a truck that's going to move out or something, watch out. But I didn't have any issues with it. It was just impeccable. So I've always had huge regard for the 959.
Okay, 959 or F40?
For me, the 959, I know exactly what you mean, and of course I'm an F40 fan, but I just love the all-round competence of that, and exactly what they were trying to achieve about it being so capable everywhere.
Yes, but with the F40, of course, you do have to have a degree of capability as a driver.
Yes, beyond mine, I think.
Yeah, beyond mine.
Log in next week to Curious Jag for part 3, with 2 more thrilling episodes diving deeper into Mel Nichols' incredible driving life.